Hello folks, I wanted to redo this video of my trip to Italy in 2024 when I visited Genoa and Cremona, as the original video wasn't that great really, not my best ever video, which is a shame as this was a trip of a lifetime. The footage suffered from GoPro malfunctions, a shaky camera problem, and that was because I'd inadvertently messed up a setting on the GoPro. And to be honest, the whole video is really not that well put together, if I'm honest, looking back on it. But I have preserved the original if you do want to go and view it, and I'll leave you the links in the description. It's also available to view in 4K as well. So, are you thinking about a trip to see Paganini's Cannoni violin and Stradivari's City? Well, I made such a trip in 2024, and as a violin lover, I consider this as somewhat of a Violin Pilgrimage, hence the name of this channel as well. So here's how that journey unfolded. Enjoy. Arriving in Italy, we flew to Milan Malpensa from Manchester Airport in the UK on the 10th of May 2024, where we stayed for 4 nights. As it was a late arrival and early departure, we stayed at the Novotel Airport Hotel at Malpensa on the first and last evenings, and in between we spent 2 nights in the Novotel Hotel Milano Nord Cagranda. So it was Novotel all the way. Hotels in Milan can be quite expensive, but we found that the Novotel hotels were reasonably priced for a good standard of accommodation. On day 1 we journeyed to Genoa. The main purpose of visiting Genoa was to see Paganini's violin, the Il Guarneri del Gesù violin. The famous Guarneri del Gesù kept at the Palazzo Doria Torsi. We decided to travel by train. And some things to bear in mind when travelling by train from Milan to Genoa. The central train station at Milano is hectic and it's quite easy to become disoriented. But if you head downstairs, there is a tourism desk where you can sort your tickets out, etc. Because Genoa is outside of Lombardy, it's actually in Liguria, it's a more expensive train journey than the one to Cremona, even though the journey time isn't that much more, assuming you take the fast train to Genoa. Genoa has historically been one of the most important ports in the Mediterranean. It was a pleasant city to walk through, with palm trees, and the warm weather with the bright blue sky on the day we visited in late spring made it all the more enjoyable. It was an interesting walk from the train station through the city, down to the quayside, to the Palazzo Doria Torsi where the Paganini violin was. Google Maps will take you to the Palazzo Doria Torsi, but there appears to be more than one entry to the building, and you have to make sure that you go through the right one and make yourself around what is like a maze inside the huge palazzo to eventually reach the Paganini room. My suggestion is to allow yourself plenty of time to get oriented and find where you are, and to get through the building on top of the allocated time you actually want to spend inside the Paganini room. I was a little delayed in arriving, unfortunately, and approaching the closing time of the palazzo. So I had to dash through the building and make my way straight to the Paganini room, but if you have more time, there is much more to see inside the Palazzo Museum, in addition to the violins and the guitars that you'll find on the way to the violins. Once I reached the Paganini room, I was mesmerised. 2 violins are on display, the Il Cannoni, Paganini's most famous violin, with a sound so powerful that Paganini likened it to a cannon, hence the name, and it was named by Paganini himself. And then the Savory violin by Violin made in 1834, which is an exact copy of the Canoni, and which Paganini passed on to his pupil Stradivari. I recently discovered that Stradivari taught Zeno Francescatti's father the violin. The layout of the displays and space of the room afford plenty of opportunity to move around the violins and examine them up close in order to admire the workmanship of these two master luthiers. The Canoni dates from 1743 and is renowned for its power and resonance, its explosive sound. There are recordings of it available, from the Caprices by Ricci to jazz fiddler Regina Carter. The violin does sometimes travel. For example, it was taken to the Royal Academy of Music in 2006 and Columbus, Ohio in 2019. Eugene Fodor, Shlomo Mintz and others have been honoured to play on this violin. Paganini bequeathed it to the city of Genoa upon his death, and it is now considered a national treasure in Italy. When in need of repair, Paganini sent the Il Canoni to the Paris workshop of Jean-Baptiste Vuillaume, the greatest luthier of his day. Not only did Vuillaume repair the Guarnerius, but he also made an exact replica. The copy was so exact that not even Paganini could distinguish one from the other. It was not until Paganini noticed subtle differences in tone that he could identify the original. Paganini presented the copy to his only student, Camillo Stradivari, who would later bequeath the instrument to the municipality of Genoa, where it is now exhibited alongside the original Il Canoni. The violins are exhibited alongside other Paganini memorabilia which are of interest within the Paganini room of the Palazzo Doria Tosi. It's also well worth taking a look at the classical guitars that are on display there. Whilst in Genoa, we had the opportunity of tasting the local speciality, pesto pasta. On day 2, I began my long-anticipated journey to the city of Cremona, the centre of the violin-making universe. On this same day, the family headed to Lake Como, where I would meet them later in the evening, so I headed out to Cremona solo. The date was Sunday the 12th of May, and the weather was again beautiful. I took the train from Milan Central to Cremona, a double-decker train that was almost empty, being the first train of the Sunday morning, and the trip took a little over an hour. There were several sights to see in Cremona of interest to violin lovers. Antonio Stradivari's first house, the Casa Stradivari, which, unlike his second house, which no longer is there, which was demolished, the first house is still standing. A couple of piazzas, the Piazza Antonio Stradivari and the Piazza Roma. The highlight, of course, the Museo, the Violin Museum of Cremona, and an additional museum which I'll come on to, which was a special treat. So we've made it to Cremona. I think maybe first we'll go and check out the Casa Stradivari, the house where Stradivari lived for a while. Greetings from the Casa Stradivari in Cremona. Sadly, the statue at the Casa Stradivari had been vandalised. I realised that the violin was missing, but I only realised later from a comment on my original video on YouTube that someone had actually vandalised it and pinched the violin, which is a shame. Cremona is an exceptionally pleasant town to walk around. Quite sleepy on a Sunday morning, although people were spilling out into the cafes, taking their coffees and relaxing. It was a relaxed atmosphere on this Sunday morning. So Strada would have been here in the early days, 1600s. Sadly, the home he actually lived and worked in for the majority of his time that he owned, it no longer stands, but it's great that this first house he lived in is still standing. And you get a feel of the place that the Amatis, Stradivari and Sons, the Guarneris, Ruggieri, Bergonzi, and the other famous Cremona luthiers lived and worked in. Greetings from the Piazza Antonio Stradivari. Here at the Piazza Roma, at the memorial of Antonio Stradivari. Sadly, the original church where he was buried no longer stands in Cremona, so once the city started to recognise its violin heritage more fully, and they put this memorial stone here in honour of Stradivari. Piazza Roma. A nice little market thing going on here. Absolutely beautiful little place. Last poem here, and greetings from the Museo del Violino, Museum of the Violin here in Cremona. The Museo was a highly fascinating experience with a mixture of both antique and more modern violins. Of course, the Guarneris, Stradivari's, Ruggieris and Amatis were amazing, but also the Andrea Amati violins, which are super rare as there are only around 20 to 25 or so remaining in the world today. Modern violins were also of particular interest. And greetings from the treasure room, Museo del Violino. The modern violins were also interesting, and of particular interest was the decorated violin by Simone Fernando Sacconi, dating from 1941. which was accompanied by a video showing how a decorated violin is made. As well as the violins, you can see replica workshops and a music experience room where you can listen to musical pieces in the dark. Being a Sunday, there was a performance scheduled at the Museo where they take one of the antique instruments out and perform on it. In this case, on this day, it was the Staufer cello by Stradivari, I believe. Sadly though, I hadn't realised that there was going to be a lunchtime performance, and as I had to rush to Lake Como, I wasn't able to attend that. But I will mention that Sunday can be a good time to go to the Museo so that you catch the performance as well. They may be playing on a Strad and Amati or Guarneri. You can hear it in the flesh. So try to go to the Museo on a Sunday if you can, and have a look at the schedule ahead of time to see if there is indeed a performance scheduled on the day you plan to visit. I stumbled across this lovely little restaurant in Cremona where I was able to sample some of the hams and salamis together with a nice glass of red wine. The Vertical Museum is a special treat which I highly recommend if you visit the city of Cremona. It gives you an absolutely breathtaking aerial view of the entire city. Guys, if you do come to Cremona, you absolutely must go up the Vertical Museum. The big tower, famous tower thing, is absolutely mind-boggling. You might be tempted to think, I've just come here to see violins, but there's so much more to see here in Cremona, and you get a panoramic view of the wonderful view of the city where Stradivari lived and worked. Why isn't this kind of more on the tourist map? Most people I'm seeing here and hearing are Italian, although I did meet a lovely Israeli couple right up the top of the tower. Had a little chat with them. But yeah, you definitely go up the Vertical Museum. It's awesome, man. You've got to do it. I then jumped back on the train and raced across to beautiful Lake Como to spend the evening with the family. Some final thoughts from Milano. I have the Duomo behind me. What a beautiful piece of architecture, and just a reminder that the arts move in parallel. Architecture, literature, art and music tends to lag a little behind, but it catches up eventually. When we talk about Baroque or whatever, classical, it's a whole movement really. Yeah, just some oh, it's wonderfully clean, this Duomo. How they keep it that clean. But yeah, just some closing thoughts on the violin trip I've made to Italy. It's been super worth it to go to Genoa and see the Il Canoni violin. Still, Gesù kind of was under time and finance pressure, unlike Stradivari. You can tell it a little bit from the purfling, although I bet you the sound will just blow you straight over. So priceless from that perspective, and the fact that it was in the hands of the great Paganini. And then Cremona, well, Cremona was far more than I expected in the end. Bigger than I expected. When you saw the panoramic view there from the top of the tower, the vertical museum, really gives you an idea of just how special a place it is for the violin, of course, but not just for the violin, just for the whole atmosphere of the place. So I hope this video has encouraged you to make your own violin pilgrimage to Italy if you're able to. A little sad that today I couldn't go to the Musical Instruments Museum because it's closed on Mondays, as I discovered the hard way. Otherwise I might have planned my trip a little differently so that I could have gone there, but hey, it's an excuse for me to come back here. So no great shakes. There's a few other things I could be doing, like on a return trip, like maybe go and see Paganini's grave in Parma, maybe head down to Mantua, see if there's anything going on down there, and all the rest of it. So at the very least, come back to Milan, even just to see the Musical Instruments Museum. So thank you for watching my video. I hope you've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed making it. I had wanted to finish my trip to Italy with a visit to the museum in Milan, the Musical Museum, which also has violins in its collections, so I understand. One thing to bear in mind though is that in Europe it's quite common for museums to be closed on a Monday, and as the last day was a Monday, I was unable to gain entry, so one for the future when I next return to Milan. As you can imagine, the food in Italy was amazing, and I'll leave you with a short slideshow of what gastronomical delights you might expect to sample when visiting this part of northern Italy. Lost time out. Ciao violinisti. Arrivederci.